Okay, Tov. Today's daf is Daf Yomi and Yebmot, as we learned for Shlema for Shlomo ben Rachel Yosef, Ezriel ben Chaim Michal, and Elazar ben Reuma, and Nomi Rivka bat Dina Shoshana. So yesterday we got into the discussion of Lo Siskoder. The question was, we started off talking about Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says that you don't marry the tzara of an Arab. In fact, it's forbidden. And that's like an erva, and then the punishment for that would be kares, and the kids would be mamzer. And Beis Shammai says saras erva, you do perform yibma. In fact, you have to either yibma or chalitza. So Umar said, well, what about lo siskoderu? You're not supposed to have different groups. You're not supposed to have machlokas in the psak halacha. So that's what the Gemara asked at the end of yesterday's daf. Beis Shammai's mater the tzaros to the achim. Not only mater, you're supposed to, right? Either do yibma or chalitza. Beis Hillel osrim. So the Gemara says at the top of Yudalid, Mi Savras Beis Shammai Kedevreim. Do you think Beis Shammai actually followed their words? No. They disagreed in principle, but they actually didn't follow their words. They agreed with Beis Hillel, and they did not allow the tzaros erva, the tzar of, let's say, of a bat. In other words, if Reuven died after he was married to Shimon's daughter, his brother Shimon's daughter, and Shimon obviously couldn't marry his daughter, but what about the tzara? So Beis Hillel says it's forbidden. In fact, she's potter, and you don't do even more chalitza. The chalitza would be meaningless. According to Beis Shammai, you have to do even more chalitza. But Beis Shammai didn't actually hold by their own psak, and they didn't follow their psak. They agreed. They acceded to what Beis Hillel said. So Misa was also Beis Shammai Kedevreim, lo asu Beis Shammai Kedevreim. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan says no, asu. They certainly did. They followed their own ruling, and that's this machlokes between Rish Lakish. How this started off with this whole question was Rish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan about Lo Siskoderu, and Rabbi Yochanan says no, they actually did. They did follow it. So the Gemara asked that. The Gemara said Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. He says, what do you mean Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? Rish Lakish started off the discussion by saying, what about Lo Siskoderu when it comes to Megillah? How do we read the Megillah on different days? Lo Siskoderu. So Beis Shammai said, why are you asking about that? You're not asking about other cases. He says, those are minhagim. I'm talking about halacha. Well, what about this case? Different halachas. He says, well, that's not a case because over here, Beis Shammai didn't follow their rule. They went according to Beis Hillel. He says, no, they did. And this machlok between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan is the same machlok as Rav Shmuel. Look at Rav Shmuel. Rav Amar lo asu Beis Shammai. That's what Rish Lakish said. Shmuel says, and Rabbi Yochanan went like Shmuel said, no, asu. They certainly did follow their reading. So you see here, there's two different psiskei halacha. So the Gemara just is like now parenthetically, Amos, wait a minute. When do you say that Beis Shammai did or did not follow their own ruling? There was a famous Baskol that came out and said that the halacha is Eilu Ve'el Divur Kim Chaim, but the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So when are we talking about over here that they did follow or did not? Ilay Makar Beis Baskol. If it was before the Baskol came out and said the halacha is like Beis Hillel, my time at Ram Lasu. What's the reason why Rish Lakish says that Beis Shammai didn't follow their own svara? If this is what they felt the halacha was, they felt they could paskin like themselves. What's the reason why they didn't follow their psak according to Rish Lakish? Elamais after the Baskol, so my time in Mandra also. After the Baskol came out and said you follow Beis Hillel, what's the reason of Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel who say they did follow their own reasoning? They're supposed to agree with now with Beis Hillel. They're supposed to go according to Beis Hillel. They have to stop following their own reasoning and agree with Beis Hillel and follow the psak that way. So I can give you an answer both ways. If you want to say Baskol was before the Baskol, and why did not Beis Shammai follow their own reasoning according to Rish Lakish? Going to Beis Hillel Ruba. Beis Hillel was the majority. The one who says they didn't follow the reasoning, Beis Hillel Ruba. Even though Beis Shammai, it was before the Baskol, and you could have possibly followed Beis Shammai in other cases, but over here, Beis Hillel was the road. Mandomer also, the one who says no, they still follow their own reasoning. When you go Basarov, when everything else is equal, when they're the same in brain power, let's say they're as sharp as one another. But over here, since Beis Shammai was sharper, even though Beis Hillel was the rove, we went according to Beis Shammai. That's the svara of Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel, who say that Beis Shammai followed their own svara before the Baskol. So I can tell you after the Baskol came out and said that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, So the one who didn't follow, who said Beis Shammai did not follow their own reasoning, the Nafka Baskal came out and said you have to go according to Beis Hillel. Mandam are also the one who said that they followed their own svara, even though it was after the Baskal. Rabbi Shua goes like Rabbi Shua, the Omar Ein Mashkichim Baskal. Rabbi Shua says we don't listen to Baskal. Torah is not in the Shemaim. Once the Torah was given to us, we have to pass. We don't listen to Baskals. So that's all in parentheses. How could they have the machlokas? How could they have their different opinions? Was it before the Baskal, after the Baskal? Fine. But the Mandam are also, but going back to this question of the Reish Lakish originally raised with Rabbi Yochanan when it came to Megillah, and now Beis Hillel says, and now rather Rabbi Yochanan answered, what about this case? How could Beis Shammai follow their svars and say that Tsaras Erva you do Yibman or Chalitza? Beis Hillel says it's forbidden because of, like we learned, Litzor, you're not allowed to just like the Erva, you don't marry the Tsaras Erva and the Tsar and the Tsar and so on and so forth. You don't do it. So mind them also. What about Los Iskodu? Los Aso Agudos Iskodu. You're not supposed to make different groups, different halachas, follow as if to say two different Torahs. Amrabaya Kim and Los Iskodu Gon Shnai Bed in Mirachas. We only say that rule when you have two courts in one city. Halal Lamam Gid Bashamai, Halal Gid Basil. One court goes like Basil, one Bashamai. Then it's a problem. Los Iskodu. Avashtei Batadin B'Shtei Aras. But if it's two different courts in two different cities, less than Ba. And that's really the same idea that we said when it comes to Megillah. They're in different cities. Some cities do the 14th, some the 15th, villages do the 13th, or the 12th, or the 11th. Different cities, it's okay. Amalei Rava, Beis Shammai had followed, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had followers in each and every city, presumably, right? So that's like two courts in one city. It's not like one city went one way, one city went another way. It's like two different courts in the same city. Elam Rava Kimmer, let's just go to the Yisrael, let's just go to Bezdin, the Irachas, one Bezdin in one city. Plag Moran Kid Basham, Plag Rav. Half the Bezdin, half that same Bezdin goes like Basham, half goes. That's what Los go do. They're fighting within the court, within the city. Two different courts in one city, then there's no problem. So the answer really we've given already, meaning we're going to deal with this some more, but the basic idea is even two courts in one city is okay. And certainly different cities is okay. That is not a problem. Los go to Tashma. We're going to see some other proofs, though. First, before we get back into the Inyan itself of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, what do they do? How did Beis Shammai Beis Hillel intermarry if Beis Shammai felt that the Tsaras Erva you do Yibam on, and Beis Hillel says that you don't? How did they intermarry subsequently in later generations? Tashma. Rabbi Lezer, you cause some eitzim lasses b'cham b'shabbos lasses barzo. Rabbi Lezer, a famous parak in Masechta Shabbos called Rabbi Lezer the Milah. Rav Lezer holds you're allowed to even prepare things for the Milah. Of course, Milah is mutter on Shabbos. You do a bris on Shabbos. Kids born on Shabbos. Next Shabbos, you perform the bris. Even though you're machal Shabbos, that's the mitzvah, right? However, you're only allowed to do the mitzvah itself. You can't start heating up coals to make a knife sharp and to you can't prepare the knife. Rav Lezer says you can. In Rav Lezer city, how you course and they would cut down trees on Shabbos. Lasos pum to make coals, bishabbos lasos barzo to make the iron, meaning to make the knife. Right? They would do that because he held you're allowed to. In his place, it didn't. Yosei Gli held. We taka also hold that there's no issur d'oraisa on poultry and milk. The issur is only if you cook meat, what we call real meat, right? Meat from a cow, beef with milk. That's the issur. But poultry is only an issur d'rabbanan. Why? Because it says only in the milk of its mother. Poultry's mothers don't have milk. So he said there was no issur there. Now he didn't hold it with issur d'rabbanan, so they used to eat basar b'chalav. There was no problem. In that city they did that, even though they disagreed with other people. Only Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Lezer allowed that Machal Shabbos. And it's not Machal Shabbos, preparing for a Milah, even though Rabbi Akiva didn't agree with that. Rabbi Akiva said any mitzvah, you're allowed to only do things that are necessary to do on Shabbos, like the Milah itself, but you can't prepare things for Shabbos. So you see there's different cities they follow different rules. The Tanya, Klalom, Rabbi Akiva, Shabbos, any malacha you could have done Erev Shabbos, ain't Dochel Shabbos, not Dochel Shabbos. And here you could have prepared the bris itself. Obviously, you can't do before Shabbos because it's too early. You can't do it till the 8th day. but you could have prepared the isma, you could have prepared the knife before, so it's not off a Shabbos. So you see that there were different customs. So why is that a kasha? We already explained that different cities in different cities, you could have different, that doesn't, having different rulings in different cities by different rabbis is not against the prohibition of Los Escoda. So that's not a kasha. What was your kasha? What was your I think because of the stringency of Shabbos, like we learned before in this Masechet, that the person Machal Shabbos is like Oved Avodah Zarah. So since Shabbos is such a stringency, I might think it's all considered like one place. Everybody should follow the same stringency. Kamash Wanda, we don't say that. Different cities had different rules, different rabbis. Tashma, another proof. Rabu, when he went to the city of Shubalevi, having metal to shraga, let's say a lamp, it was lit at the beginning of Shabbos, so it's also it's muksa machmas mulach, it was lit, and then the light extinguished, the flame extinguished. Now it's muksa. So, but when Rabbi Vu went to the town of Shubalevi, he would move it. He didn't hold the muksa. He went like Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold the muksa. Rabbi Shubalevi, he would move an extinguished lamp on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan, who held up muksa, loved metal to shagar. He didn't. So you see here again, Rabbi Shimon Levi, the town, Rabbi Vu did move muksa on Shabbos, and Rabbi Yochanan's town he didn't. So you see also a different minhagim. Why isn't it a problem? Why is that a kasha? Didn't we already explain that in different places, they follow different rules? So kasha is not that in different cities they had different rules. That we can understand. But how did Rabbi Vu in one city he picked up muktzah on Shabbos, in another city he didn't book muktzah. How does he do that? And so Rabbi Vu Levi only holds like Rabbi Shimon Levi, who holds like Rabbi Shimon that he doesn't know the muktzah, and therefore he would move it. When he went to Rabbi Yochanan's town, out of respect for Rabbi Yochanan, who felt that it was forbidden, because of the honor of Rabbi Yochanan. What about his shamas? What about Rabbi Vu's shamas, who basically was an Amoritz, and he saw him being moving muktzah in Rabbi Shimon Levi's town? Wouldn't he then follow and do it in Rabbi Yochanan's town? The Model Hashem, he told the shamas what to do. They explained to him that that I don't hold the muktzah, but in Rabbi Yochanan's town we have to show him respect. Okay. Pardon? Yeah, that talks about dressing and things like that. I'm talking about halachas though. Halachas, you don't change the halacha just because you go to if I go to a reformed town in America and there's no Orthodox shul, I'm not going to follow the reform minhag and drive on Shabbos or whatever. You know what I mean? So it doesn't. It's only when in Rome to Roman is a secular term, and that's more like for customs and things like that, but not when it comes to halacha. Here, though, even when it comes to halacha, out of respect, he held that it was mutter. He didn't hold the muktzah, but he went to a town where Rabbi Yochanan was the rabbi, and he held the muktzah. So out of respect, he also didn't move muktzah on Shabbos. Tashma. Now we're going to come to our issue. So we've already explained the issue of lo siskodu, but the issue is we've raised the issue in our Mishnah and in the Gemara about Beishamai Beisil. Now, what's the key here? The key to understand is Beishamai says Saras Erva, you do Yibamon or Chalitza. It's necessary. With Beisil says, you can't do Yibam. You're going to make a mamzer. That's Karas. So what's going on? Tashma Afdi She'elu Matzir. We said in our Mishnah, even though what? Beisil says the Saras Erva is also, and Beishamai says it's mutter. Lo nimna Beishamai lisa nashim Beisil. Beishamai did not refrain from marrying Beisil's women below Beisil Beishamai. They didn't refrain, they intermarried. Now you have a Bishlam, a Loasu. Okay, go back to our issue. Now we're going to deal with our mission. We're also going to the issue of did Beis Shammai follow their own rulings or not? If you say they didn't follow their own ruling, very good. You know why Beis Shammai so intermarried? Because Beis Shammai never really followed through with their psak, and they didn't marry the tzaras. They didn't marry the tzaras. Eliyamar also, if they did, Amai lo nimnu, why didn't they refrain? Bishlam Beis Shammai Beisil lo nimnu. I understand why Beis Shammai had no problem intermarrying with Beisil. You know why? Because according to Beis Shammai, Beis Shammai says if you have a tzaras erva, you got to do yibum or chalitza. Beisil says nothing. There's no yibum, there's no chalitza here. It's an erva. She just marries the shuk. So if one of those girls, right, if it's tzaras erva, according to Beisil, she marries the shuk. She marries anybody. Marries guy, right? She goes and marries guy. According to Beis Shammai, that's yivama l'shuk. She's not supposed to, but it's only a lot. It's only a lot. Even though we said yesterday is a shaila between Rav and Shmuel later on whether kedushin is tofes, but everybody holds that there's no, except for Rabbi Kiva, we'll see the shita, but everybody except for one shita, because Rabbi Kiva already holds that there's no mamzer over there. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Beis Shammai Beis Hillel lo nimna. In some way, Beis Shammai married Beis Hillel's women to Bnei Chai V'Lavan, because they said, listen, it's only, the worst is it's the Yavama L'Shuk, right? Yavama L'Shuk. Beis Hillel, according to Beis Hillel, that says the Yavama marries L'Shuk, so Yibam Chalitza. So Beis Shammai says, no, you have to have Yibam Chalitza. So this woman's L'Shuk, so it's only a lav. Ela Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai Amai lo nimna. How could Beis Hillel marry Beis Shammai's girls? Bnei Chai V'Krisis Mamzeir Ninu. According to Beis Hillel, what did Beis Shammai do? The Tzara went and married the Yavam, right? And that's erva. That Tsaras erva is an erva, according to Beis Hillel. And therefore, you're not allowed to marry there. The 15 women that we said in the Mishnah, you don't marry your daughter, you don't marry your daughter's co-wife. And if you do, it's like Eish Zachar Shalom Makam Mitzvah. Chayav Koros. It's Mamzerim. How could Beis Hillel marry Beis Shammai's women? Some of them would be Mamzerim. Maybe you hold like that there's a shita holds that there's no mamzer there from Chayv Krisis, only Chayv Misas Bezdin, like Rashi points out, like you marry your mother or your mother-in-law or your daughter-in-law, then if there's Eidim and Asra, Bezdin kills you. If you marry your sister, which is not a marriage, it's not Chal, Bezdin doesn't kill you on that, just Chorus. So maybe only if there's a Misas Bezdin, only over there is a mamzer, but that's not the case. Even though they disagree about the tsaros erva, do you marry or not? They're both moda that the mamzer is only from Isser erva v'anush kares. So it doesn't go like that sheet that's got to have a chiv misa. There's kares over here. So how could they still marry Beis Shammai's women? They would have mamzerim over there, because according to Beis Hillel, if the tzara marries the yavam, that makes a mamzer. It must be the lawsuit that we said before. Rav and Rish Lakish held they didn't actually follow their own reasons. So no, but really Beis Shammai followed their own svaras, and the tsaras erva married the yavam. The modalahu muparshi. The answer is Beis Shammai kept records, like we mentioned the other day in the Mishnah. Beis Shammai kept records. And if Beis Hillel wanted to marry a certain woman, say, well, listen, according to you, this lady's a mamzer. We don't hold that way, but we hold the lady's a mamzer. The Modalu Pashi. They let him know, and they stayed away from that woman. It's mistaver that way, that they followed their own reasoning, and yet they let him know. They're trying to say, what did the end of the Mishnah say? Kol Torahs v'Tmeis. Beis Hillel generally held were more mach when it comes to things that are Torah and Tamei. And they things that Beis Shammai felt were Torah, Beis Hillel said that's Tamei. So it says over there, in other words, they exchanged one another's vessels and kalim and things like that. They didn't hold back. Now, and they, even though they disagreed with what's tar, what's tameh. If you told me that Beis Shammai said, look, be careful with this one. I know you hold this as tameh, so don't use this one. They let him know. That's why they didn't refrain from using one another's kalim. If they didn't let him know, if they don't know, how did that work? Right. Beis Shammai didn't refrain from using Beis Hillel's, because anything that Beis Hillel said is Torah is for sure Torah according to Beis Shammai. Right? The Tmeis Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai Torah for Beis Shammai everything is Torah. Anything, even the things that Beis Hillel was Tamei, Beis Shammai was Matar. So certainly, if Beis Hillel was Matar something, certainly Beis Shammai would hold Torah. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai Lanu. Why didn't Beis Hillel? How could Beis Hillel use Beis Shammai's kalim if they held what Beis Shammai says is Torah according to Beis Hillel is Tamei, right? It must be that Beis Shammai kept record and said, "This is Tamei according to you. I know you hold. You don't eat this food, right? You know, I eat this. I eat heter mechira. You know." But that's exactly the question. The answer is what about mamzer? So we said before, the answer is that Beis Shammai let them know. They kept records. Who's a mamzer, who's not. In other words, we kept records. If it's Sarah, according to Beis Shammai says Sarah Sarah can marry the Yavam. And if they did, that's fine. Beis Shammai says that's a mitzvah, you're supposed to. But Beis Hillel held it's a mamzer. So they kept records and they let them know who's who. Yeah. Well, yeah. If you followed by Beis Shammai, you didn't think it was a mamzer. Understand?
If this is right.
Yeah.
Then the world now is
okay.
filled with mamzerim.
The world is filled with mamzerim. According to everybody, it's filled with mamzerim. We don't know exactly right. But the point is they kept records. That's what you have to do. What are we doing now? Another 100,000 Ukrainian goyim are coming here now. What's going to be in 10 years? Oh, we have to take them all. Yeah, take them all in. Then what's going to happen in 10 years? They'll be intermarrying just like the Russians. Nobody knows who's what. And then you say, yeah, well, the rabbis.
That's not the same as Moshe.
I understand. So not the same as mamzerim. A lot of them are mamzerim. It's even worse when they're mamzerim. A goy could be magayer, a mamzer cannot. But the answer is that a lot of them are mamzerim too. So elav shmami, and as the answer is, let him know. So one of two: either Beis Shammai didn't follow their own svaras, or if they followed them, they kept records, so they let them know, as you have to do today. If your kid's getting married, somebody you have to know who's what. Okay. So Gemara says. So why is the Kalim more of a proof than the intermarrying? I said Beis Shammai Beis Hillel disagreed about Tzara marrying Yibam, Tzara Sefer marrying Yibam, and they disagreed about Taras. So he says, it must be that they let him know, because if they didn't let him know, how could Beis Hillel use Beis Shammai's Kalim, right? The answer is Beis Shammai kept records, so they told him which is Tameh, which is Torah, according to your reasoning, So it must be that way. But why is that more of a proof in the case of the marriage? But the marriage also, it must be that they kept records. So he says, it's mustafa that they kept records, because otherwise, how do they do with the Kalim? Why is the Kalim more of a proof the other way? The other way is also, maybe they didn't keep records, but everybody knows if this tzara of an erva married, people would know about it. In other words, you know who's kosher and who's not kosher, who's mamzer and not kamash b'lan. That but by the kalim, people didn't keep a record. This kalim is there's a rumor that this kli is Torah. That's not the case by kalim. When it comes to a woman, that's sorrow. You hear the case of a yavam. Guy died with no children, and he was married to her sister, to her child. He was married to Shimon's daughter, and the tzara, what happened to her? So people will know about it. So you might think even without records, Kamash one that they kept records, like we see with the case of the Kalim. Guf Amar Blazer, even though Beis Shammai still argue about tzaras, erva we mean over here. Modem shein mamzer mishay suris erva. They're both moda. That a mamzer is only if there's an isser erva. In other words, it's a forbidden relationship. Anush kares and the punishment of kares, for example, like marrying your sister, okay, that would be a mamzer. Okay, certainly a case of Eishes Ish, because Eishes Ish chayev bezdin. There certainly be a mamzer, right? If somebody committed adultery with a married woman and there were Edom and Asra, you kill that person, right? You get chenek for that. If it's even an arusa, a skila, even a bigger punishment of skila. So the point is, though, it has to be at least a minimum of Isser Erev Onish Kares. Man modem, who's moded to over here? When you say the moded, Ilay Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai is moded to Beis Hillel, Shita Ben Echav Lavim Kshev Nirim. What do you mean? Even though they disagree about the tzaras, they're moded that there's only a mamzer from Chayv Lavim from Isser Kares. But what do you mean? According to Beis Shammai wants to marry a girl from Beis Hillel, right? What's the problem? That Beis Hillel says that the tzara can marry Guy, can marry Lashuk. It's an Osir Lav. So what kind of a chorus is over there? Beis Shammai's motive to Beis Hillel that a mamzer is only from Chayve Krisis, Isser Erev Onish Chorus. Over here, it's not even a chorus. It's only a lav. There's certainly not a mamzer. Beis Hillel's girls are certainly not mamzerim according to Beis Shammai. Ella Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel's motive to Beis Shammai. He go for Chayve Krisis. What do you mean? You're saying even though they disagree, their moda that there's only chorus from Chayve there's only a mamzer from Isser Erev and Onish Chorus. This is Onish Chorus according to Beis Hillel. What Beis Shammai says to do, that the Tzaras Erva performs Yibum or Chalitza, that is an issue of Chorus. Beis Hillel holds that that's an Erva, that the daughter, your Shimon's daughter, who fell Yibum now to Shimon, not just like he can't marry his own daughter, the Tsar is also Erva, and if Shimon marries the co-wife, that is also Issachar. So what do you mean their moda? This is even though they disagree, their moda that there's only an Isser, there's only Kare, is only Mamzer from Isser Erev and Ashkaris. This is Issachar. According to Beis Hillel, the Tsar of the Erva is Issachar, and that would make a Mamzer. So what's going on? What are their motives? Is motive to one another. We had before the Rabbi Kiva disagrees about Shabbos, that he holds that you can only do things on Shabbos which are necessary to do on Shabbos. He couldn't prepare them before. Rabbi Kiva is also the one who holds he's more machmer. In other words, we said there's another sheet who holds there's only a mamzer from Chayve Mises Pesen. The general sheet is there's mamzer from Chayve Krisis and Ervin and Chayve Krisis. Rabbi Kiva holds is even a mamzer from Chayve Lav, and he holds that a Yavama marries Lashuk. Even that is a mamzer. Even if Yavama, Shemeres Yavama marries Guy without having Yibum or Chalitza, that's also a mamzer according to Rabbi Kiva. The answer is everybody's Beis Shammai is motor to Beis Hillel. That even though when Beis Shammai marries Beis Hillel's girls, even though those girls marry guy without even more chalitza, but he's motor, that's not a mamzer. In other words, exclude Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva holds there's even mamzer from Chai V'Lavin. We don't hold that way. We hold that it's only the general idea is that there's only mamzer from Chai V'Krisis. They mamzer from Chai V'Lavin, only from Chai V'Krisis. Toshma. I'll be shnach Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'soros.
Bearing the tzur, it's a rabbanim. If you marry the tzur, it's a rabbanim.
It's not a rabbanim. Now, according to Beis Hillel holds that the tsar of the erva is forbidden. Just like you can't marry the daughter, you can't marry the daughter. Daraisa, of course, forbidden daraisa. It's forbidden daraisa, and the kid would be a mamzer. Beis Shammai holds not only is it not an issur daraisa, it's not an issur rabban, and it's a mitzvah. You're supposed to marry. You're supposed to be more chalitza. Tashma. Even though Beis Shammai still disagree about different cases, for example, tsaros, that we just talked about tsaros erva, uvachoyas. We're going to see later on in the third parak. 4 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. 2 brothers are married to 2 sisters. They both die in a car accident. No children. Now these 2 sisters fall even to whom? Levi and Yehuda. That's what we call achot skukoso. Achot isha you can't marry in the Torah. Achot skukoso is only drabanan. There's a machlok special mashamai. If they got married, they got to get divorced or not. Okay, because it's achot skukoso, it's a drabanan. So even though they argue in that case, uba get yoshem. Man divorces his wife, and then they happen to sleep together in the same hotel. Do you need a get or not? Beis Hillel says you need a get. There might have been some hanky-panky there, right? And he might have done L'Shem Kedushin. Not hanky-panky, L'Shem Kedushin. He might have changed his mind now. He's not a Kohen. Maybe he changed his mind. He said, well, let's let bygones be bygones. Let's what do they call it? To do the vows again. What do they call that? You know? let's renew our vows, right? Renew our vows. Michael, I need help with the English here, you know? Right. So let's renew our vows again. Maybe L'Shem Kedushin. So Beis Hillel says you need a get. Sham says you don't. Over suffik ish. A man divorces his wife. He gets to listen. He's sick. He doesn't want her to fall yibam. So he says, I'll tell you, I'm giving you a get right now. If I die from this disease, I'm giving you a get from today. So you shouldn't have to have yibam. A lot of people do that. We give a get. They go out to war. Remember, give a get. So you shouldn't have yibam or a suffix, whatever. So what is she during that time? He's still lingering, right? What is she? Is she a man? So that's also suffix ish. What's the halacha over there? Okay, that all these things are a question. There's machlok from Misham. So couldn't get, like I just said, he divorced his wife and they stayed together at the hotel. Or Bekesef B'Shavakesef, what constitutes kedushin? He gives her a ring. They said, is it worth a pruta? They says pruta. Beishamai says kesef, it's got to be worth a dinner. Kesef Shavakesef, even though there's a machlok about the different. Lo nimna Beishamai melisa nashim Beis Hillel, lo Beis Hillel Beishamai. And they intermarried. They didn't refrain from intermarrying with one another. That love and friendship, they had love and friendship among them. That they had love and friendship among them, even though they disagreed about different things. To fulfill what it says in the pasuk, you should love truth and peace. Love those things. In other words, even when there's disagreements, let's agree to disagree, etc. But they said they married one another. If Shimon Omer nimnem varit. They did stay away from things which are certainly prohibited. If Beishamai allowed a Yevamah to marry the Yavam when Beis Hillel says it's forbidden, they stayed away from it. They didn't stay away from a suffix. If it's a suffix, we'll talk about what a suffix is. Not sure what a suffix is at this point. Is it the case of Megarish, Velona, Mapunki, or what suffix is? But they didn't refrain from those. Now, Asu. So what is this whole mission? The mission says they married one another. If they married one another, Mishamachi Nimnu. That's why Shimon says they stayed away from a vadai thing, right? You know for sure that there's a mamzer over there that created a mamzer. They stayed away. I understand if they followed Eliyam at Lo Asu. Again, back we're dealing with the machlokas here between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, same as machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Did Beis Shammai follow their own sfaras or not? So if you say what they did follow, so we understand why Rabbi Shimon says they did refrain from certain cases because Beis Shammai followed their own reasoning. Eliyam at Lo Asu. If they didn't follow, why did they have to hold back? Why did they hold back from certain cases? They didn't follow their own reason anyway. They went according to Beis Hillel. It says, but Tizber nehinami da'asu. Even if they did follow, so Bishlam Beis Hillel and then the Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel stayed with Shammai. Why? The Chavi Kristin Mamzeirim. Beis Hillel would not marry Beis Shammai's women. Some of those women were Mamzeirim. Mamzeirim the Beis Hillel. Ela Beis Shammai amay nimnu Beis Hillel. Why did they stay away from Beis Hillel's women? Bnei Chavi Lavinin uksheim ninu. they're really what could they be? Worst is that Yavama, according to Beis Shammai, the Tsaras Erva was supposed to have Yibmor Chalitza. And Beis Hillel said, no, just go marry a guy in the shuk, and that's it. So worse is this Chayv Lavin, they're not Mamzerim. The Gemara says, the answer is Kedam, Rav Nachman Yitzchak is going to say, L'tzara Atzma. Here's what they held back. You know what they held back from? Beis Shammai. Why did Beis Shammai not marry Beis Hillel's women? Beis Shammai did not marry Beis Hillel's women because the Tzara herself, what's her halacha? According to Beis Hillel, it's Potter, you don't know Yibmor Chalitza. According to Beis Shammai, you have to have Yibmor Chalitza. So you can't marry this woman unless she had Chalitza. That's what it means. Beis Shammai did not marry that woman unless she had Chalitza. Otherwise, it's Yibam L'Shuk. That's what he means. We're not talking about the children who are not Mamzerim. It's only Chayv Elav, there's no Mamzerim there anyway. Why didn't Beis Shammai marry Beis Hillel's children? They're not Mamzerim. The answer is you didn't marry the Tzara herself without having Chalitza. That's what it means. It's Rashi Tzara Atzma. Hadikani Nim Tzara Atzma. Lo Beis Shammai Nami Nim Beis Hillel. Milisa Tzara Sabas below Chalitza. Rav Nachman is going to say that in a few lines. So that's what we're speaking about over here. That's what it means that if you hold that they also, why Beis Shammai refrain? So why did Rav Shimon say they stayed away from Vade ones? Where you know for sure that that it was also Mivade Yisuru, Suffolk Nami Yisuru. If you stay away from them, if a Suffolk also you should stay away from. You didn't stay away from a Suffolk. El Eimam and Astam. If a stam woman, they didn't stay away. Why? The modal parsh. In other words, Beis Shammai rely. If you hold that Beis Shammai followed their own svaras, and you say that they stayed away from women. If that would be the case, Beis Shammai followed their own reason. Beis Hillel would not marry some of those women or some of those children because they'd be mamzerim. But what he means over here is so. Why do you say they stayed away from for sure ones, but not from stam, not from Suffolk? Doesn't mean Suffolk. Stam. In other words, in a stam case, if they didn't know, you saw Beis Hillel saw a girl from Beis Shammai, they would marry them because had she been a mamzer, according to Beis Hillel's shita, Beis Shammai would have notified them. The modal parshit. Umay kamash malon. So what's the chiddush Rav Shimon? The Tanna Kama said over here, even though they disagreed about this and this and this and this and this, they married one another because emes v'shalom ahavu. They were not. Rav Shimon says they stayed away from the Badai, but they didn't stay away from the Suffolk. Okay, from an Astam. Okay, to show you because they notified one another. So what's his chiddush? My kamashman da'av of reyes nogim zeh hainu reisha. That's the same as a reisha. Hakamashman the kul Rav Shimon. It's all Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says the same thing. Rav Shimon says that it's all Rav Shimon. That even though they disagreed, but they loved one another and they treated one another nicely and they intermarried with one another because they knew that if somebody was wrong to marry, Beis Shammai knew that if somebody, according to their shita, was okay, but according to Beis Hillel was a mamzer, they would have notified them. So if you hold that Beis Shammai did not follow their svaras, right? That's why if they didn't follow their own reason. That's why lo nimah, because they didn't follow their own halacha. But if you hold they did follow their own halacha, they notified them, and that's it. Tashma, Adam Rabbi Yochanan Nuri. Rabbi says, listen, what do we have to go into all these problems for? You have a tzara server. What does Beis Hillel say? Motul l'shuk. Tzara server is potter min yibam chalitza ma'ashuk. What does Beis Shammai say? You do yibam chalitza. But if you do yibam, according to Beis Hillel, you're going to make a mamzer over there, right? It's forbidden kares, and you're going to make a mamzer. Why not just do chalitza? Why just do chalitza? According to Beis Hillel, it's meaningless. And according to Beis Shammai, it serves the function. Do chalitza on her. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Hey, halacha zu Rav Chazu. How are we going to have this halacha? Nasik Beis Shammai. If you go follow Beis Shammai, havlad mamzer Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds that's a mamzer. Nasik Beis Hillel. If you go like Beis Hillel, havlad pogum with Beis Shammai. Even though it's not a mamzer, it's the child is still a pogum. For example, if it would be a girl, wouldn't be able to marry a kohen, or the son wouldn't have the halacha of a kohen because he's a pogum. What pogum means, he's damaged. He's what's the word? There's a word for it. I can't think of it in English. He's pogum. There's something wrong with him, right? He's tainted. What tainted? Yeah, tainted. You said tainted? Defect? No, tainted is the word I'm looking for. Right? Okay. So Avlad pogum, the different Beis Shammai, he's tainted, and it'd be a problem with marrying with kahuna. So he says. So what Rabbi Yochanan says? Listen, you can't have two different halachas. Bo ben atakin. Let's make a halacha. Let's assume that the tzaras ervish give chalitza. Then nobody gets hurt, right? Nobody gets hurt. Beis Hillel said for Beis Hillel you don't need it, but it doesn't hurt. Chalitza. Okay, when Mary Cohen she calls them samas. Below speaking English, they weren't able to finalize that halacha. As if to say min hashamayim that we don't want to do that. because exactly you're going to make people usher for guna, and we want to show that the law is like Beis Hillel. Not to say let's compromise over here. Compromise doesn't always work. Doesn't work. Everybody gets hurt a little bit, right? So it says they didn't want to do that. So what are we going to do for the original tsaros? What about them? Yeah, now what are you going to do them? It's mash. Okay, now you want to. So what are we going to do to them? You're looking for a solution. Shmuel said, but what are we going to do for the ones who are already intermarried with the tsaros erva, who according to Beishamai married before? Now, now if you say they followed Hainu the Comer, Manasa, what are we going to do for them? Right? What are we going to do for them? Apparently, there's already Mamzerim. It's mashma that they did follow, like who? Like Rish Lakish and like Rab. Eliyam Lo Asu. If they didn't follow them, my Manasa, what do we do for them? They didn't follow their as far as anyway. What do you have to worry about? Mamzerim? So here's what Nachman said it. We're not talking about. The truth is that they didn't. Beishamai maybe didn't follow their own svaras, and they didn't allow Yibam. But what do you do with the tzara herself? According to Beis Hillel, she's free to marry without anything. According to Beishamai, you need at least chalitza. What do you do with the tzara herself? Uma nasa. What does it mean by nasa? Hachikamar. Hanach tzaras to Beis Hillel leBeishamai. According to Beis Hillel, no problem. Marry him. El Beishamai. What should we do with them? They married Lashuk, right? We just say now. Let's say married Lashuk. The tsaros of erva, which according to Beis Hillel can marry Lashuk. So they married guy in the street, right? What should you do now for Beishamai? What are you going to do? Beis Shammai says you need chalitza. Lichvitzu. If you're going to give them chalitza now, Masay Gavara, they'll feel their husbands will find them repulsive because they got chalitza. So who cares? That's not the way of the Torah. So you're not going to force somebody to get chalitza now after they're married already to somebody in the street. So that's his question is, what are we going to do for these tsaros erva? Now, Lamaisa we go like Beis Hillel. But the question was, did Beis Shammai follow their own reasoning and then they had to keep records and all that? Or do you say, no, they never followed their own reasoning? But his question was, the tzara herself, what you're going to do with her? Beis Hillel says you marry a guy. So according to Beis Shammai, let's say, right, according to Beis Shammai, what do you do with her now? You want to solve everybody's problem, give her chalitza? She's already married. It may not be so comfortable for him to stay married to somebody who got chalitza. All right, we'll pick him here tomorrow.